Hi, Paul Moreton, Technical Advisor for Germinal in the Northwest. I'm going to present my 2018 height of cut trials I did at my local golf course. It'll be a reduced talk. I wouldn't expect you to sit through the full 30-40 minute presentation in a video format. Anyway, here are all the findings and results of those trials. So my objectives were to offer data to assist with all the unrealistic presentation pressures that all greenkeepers are under these days. We'll monitor all the major species at 3 different cutting heights, which was 4, 3 and 2 mil. Did all the common ones, plus I included ryegrass as well, just because just a lot of people are using it now, and we'll see what the results would end up. The key is they were going to be maintained as live trials. Basically, it's how we do our breeding as well. So we don't want to make them too dependent on fertilizers or any chemicals. We want to see how the plant actually sustains itself. There was the heights I mentioned. I had a few issues with the site. It was a natural sand pit that was kindly given to use at Gathurst Golf Club. It went solid hard when it was dry within a week, and it was very silty and slimy, and the pH was ridiculously high, which I didn't find out about till a bit later into the trial. We had a very wet and cold 2017, and obviously 2018, as we all know, was very tricky, but it still performed pretty well. The first germination we had was a very cold March, and the first surprise I got was the creeping bentgrass came through just as quick as ryegrass. So germination, even in those colder temperatures, right from the beginning, threw up a few surprises. You can see here the weather inconsistencies we had, the difference just in 1 year, and then obviously 2019 was back similar to what it was 2017. So yeah, obviously 2018, as we all remember, yeah, just threw up a lot of difficulties. Yeah, so I had to feed them more than I would like just to get them established, because it was just so leached through, and it was obviously very wet in 2017. But then, like I said, because I didn't check the pH, the take-all was ridiculous through August. It hit everything, except for the fescue, obviously, to the point where I kind of gave up on it to a point, but they did come back eventually. This was the only photo I took, and that was the velvet bent plot, which was hit probably the worst, and this was a few months later when it started recovering on its own. So basically, over that winter after the establishment, I tried a few things just to get the grass growing, and one of the first things was just a ericaceous compost I got from B&Q actually, and put it on. And this picture shows the fescue border and the fescue plot, which was sown exactly the same time and had the same maintenance and everything. The only difference was that ericaceous compost, and it made them so much better, just slightly lower in that pH, and giving them something to live on, really, other than pure sand. So I first took them down to 4 mil in May 2018, and you can see from the picture it's already starting to dry out. 3 weeks later we went down to 3 mil, and then another 3 weeks down to 2 mil. So this was the full commence cutting, bone dry. I was up as often as I could, hand watering. Danny, the head greenkeeper, and his lads were helping as much as they could too. It was very hard to keep it alive. So ryegrass, the newer varieties, are obviously much more suitable for the height of cuts than the older varieties. We've made a lot more advancements on them. It's still a bunch type plant, you know, so you don't get that natural spreading that you do from fescues and certainly creeping bents. Very soft winter growth, and when I did feed it, it had a lot of excessive growth. It was okay to start with, but as it got drier and more dependent on the moisture and even the nutrients as well, we just started losing the coverage, and at 2 mil in September, I'd say the coverage was 50%, so we'd lost a fair bit of it. In September in the North West, we did get quite a bit of rain actually, so things came back. So it needed too much feed was the summary. It didn't like being taken down, letting to grow, then taken down again. I mean, that's why we use it on cricket wickets. That's the results you get. You know, it dies when we take it down, and it comes back, and then it just didn't like it on golf course conditions. It didn't get any disease, which is probably the best trait it has got. Next was Velvet. Has a poor reputation, obviously. It was kind of brought in a bit too soon, I think, when we initially started selling it. It did suffer from bad take-all, but to be fair, that was the site issues. The recovery was fantastic once it came back. No disease other than the take-all. Didn't require much nitrogen, and the shoot density was great. You can see in the pictures it does look okay. Obviously the scars were there, and by September, again with nothing, it was starting to fill in quite nicely just on its own. Yeah, like I said, it did recover well. It would need more frequent brushing and scarifying than any of the other species, which is not saying it's excessive, but it did become quite tufty and under infrequent mowing, and obviously I wasn't mowing these every single day. But in a normal regime, yeah, it did do well, especially under those pressures. Fescue threw up a lot of surprises. It's obviously our traditional favourite. The main reason we're obviously falling out of love with it a little bit is it's just not conducive to the modern play and pressures we're putting it under. It was fantastic in the drought and disease and everything and low inputs. It was very slow to establish, and the growing season I found didn't really kick in till probably June. You know, the first 3 or 4 months of growth, there was just hardly any clippings coming off it. But yeah, the pictures tell a different story. You know, it probably had equally the best coverage come the end of the trial in August, which even at 2 mil, it really did surprise me. It did really, really well. It did start to decline as the weather dropped. Obviously my trials finished in September, so from there on, you know, I didn't really record much, but it did start going down. The key was, I think, for establishment that I brought it down from a height rather than it trying to grow up like we do when we're overseeding, which is obviously not realistic in how we maintain our greens. So that was the key, having mature fescue to start with. So next was the new species of creeping bent. The new varieties are much more suited to our climate, and even since I began these trials, we've got more and more guys using them, getting great results. You slightly need to change your greenkeeping practices, but not a huge amount, and that's once you've got a fair few plants in your greens. You can see from the pictures the coverage was fantastic. The gaps in between are obviously the drought stress, which, like I said, was very hard to keep anything alive. By the end of August, the coverage was just as good as the fescue, but going forward, it just got better and better as well after the trial had finished. When it self-remedied after the take-all, that was the quickest out of all the Browntops and the Velvets to come back, and also during the actual trial itself, it didn't get any take-all. There wasn't the smallest amount on there, and also it was the least dependent on nitrogen out of all the plots. And then I said, once the stress had finished from the drought, it really did start thriving come the back end. Obviously, I had to do a control plot, which was Poa meadowgrass. Yeah, I wasn't really expecting much from it, but it's in all our greens. As you can see, you know, within literally minutes, I've taken it down. It had died. August, we had a lot of rain, like I said, in the northwest, and it came back. It was so fluffy and soft and needed feeding, but that's one of its best traits. It did come back pretty well. but as you can see in July there was nothing left. Like I mentioned, it did what it needed, what it does, what we need it to do. It is that support plant, or it can save us when we have other issues as well. The native browntop, common native browntop, is obviously the species was most common in the UK. It did pretty well. There was a bit of a problem with the trial plot. It was the one right on the end, and it got a bit of wash off, so never really fully established. So I couldn't really give it full scores. But where the grass was, it was healthy and okay. Like I said, the gaps in those pitches tend to be where the water was washing through. So it wasn't unfortunately a fair trial, but it did pretty well. I think the biggest thing I noticed from the browntop was to keep a sward would have to continually overseed to it. There's obviously not that much spreading or colonizing on its own, and I think that's why we look at the amounts of seed we need to apply to get the best results compared to obviously creep and bent and velvet and things like that. So yeah, it requires a bit more effort to get a sward of it. Towards the end of the trial, with the fescue doing so well, I kind of thought, this was going against a lot of what was happening in the real world, and I kind of thought, well, we're not actually putting any wear on them. So I went out one day and just hammered them with a hammer, literally, to replicate pitch marks, and then Danny went over them really heavily with a scarifier, and we just rip them to pieces just to see. I only did the fescue and the creep and bent just to monitor them. So the pitch mark on the creep and bent after 1 week was pretty much gone, and as you can see, the scarification lines are very healthy and growing in as well. In contrast to that, the fescue pitch mark didn't repair, and the scarifying actually caused more damage, which that kind of reminded me, fescue doesn't like to be overused, over manhandled. So as soon as we started applying wear to it, it just went backwards. A bit further after this, pretty much most of that had gone brown and stalky and died off. It didn't like it at all. So the conclusions, ryegrass is suitable. I know a few guys are using it. I certainly wouldn't use it as a straight. So yeah, mixing it with one of the other species, or using it as a disease repair. Velvet, again, I probably wouldn't use it as a straight now. Certainly as a mixture. I know in the States now they're starting to mix it with the creep and bent and getting good results. Fescue, obviously links and places like that, perfect. I think the parkland courses just not suited with the demands we're putting all year round on it now, and also just getting established is probably the problem with it. Creep and bent, yeah, it performed the best in the trials. The newer varieties are just getting better and better all the time. Yeah, there is a slight change in management, but it won't be a negative thing. It'll just be slightly different mowing, slightly different dressing, things like that. Nothing major. And browntop, yeah, it's always going to be there. It's always going to be your backup sort of species to go to. But yeah, it works well, and it's a good with creep and bent in a mix as well. So yeah, it's a big thank you to Danny, who obviously did most of the physical work, and to Get This for giving me the spot of land as well. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. Rattled through it quite quickly, but if there's anything more you ever want me to discuss it, I'll certainly come and give a presentation to your golf course. So thank you.